Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast, episode 20, where we will be covering today lesson 24 and 25, which are the two final lessons of the Herzog Masterclass. Of course, I'm joined by Clark Coffey, as always. How are you?
As always. Hey, Colin.
It's going to be a fun one. This one actually is, we've been talking about specifically documentary for the past few lessons, and now we get to talk what I think is really a great way to kind of end this section of our podcast, which is all about career strategy. It's all about life as a filmmaker. So not necessarily the techniques or anything like that, but rather
a lot of like a mix of practical, pragmatic strategies and philosophy, which is kind of, I feel like, what this whole podcast thus far has been. And one of the things that I really love about Herzog's Masterclass in general is that, I find his philosophy on art, his philosophy on filmmaking is quite helpful for me. Herzog talks about, and we're going to get into this, but he talks about one of the ways that you deal with rejection and life as a filmmaker is to fill yourself with philosophy. I love that he uses that word with poetry and philosophy, but Herzog's kind of philosophy is a big part of what I use to fill myself up when I'm feeling down. But even though we're in the last couple lessons of Herzog's Masterclass, it is important to note that it is not going to be the last episode of the podcast.
Yes.
So I'm really excited about, not that following these lessons hasn't been fun. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, but it's pretty exciting that we get to move forward in a new path now. We're still focusing on cinema and utilizing Herzog's output, so to speak, as a jumping off point to study film and the philosophy of cinema and filmmaking. But it's going to be exciting. We've got some interviews that we're going to line up, people who've worked with Herzog. We've got his films.
Yeah, we're going to go through his films. I think it's also important to note, if you are interested in us talking about a specific topic, then reach out to us via Facebook or email or whatever.
Right.
And please, to let us know.
We're totally
We've got Twitter,
open.
We've got Instagram as well, so all the the messaging
socials.
is open.
All the socials.
Message us on there and let us know if you there's a topic that you really want to talk. Of course, especially considering that it's only us doing this. It's only us two. We don't have a team of anyone.
Right.
That we.
Well, you don't.
There's.
I've got
I guess you've got your whole production team.
I've got
staff
a whole
over
production
there.
team here. So
but I think it's important to note that we can kind of make these decisions, and we don't have like set times that we go it must be 50 minutes. So we might if there's an interesting topic that only takes us 25 minutes to cover,
we'll take it.
We might do we might do that. So
and then we'll sing show tunes for the other 25 minutes or so to round out the podcast. But we're totally open.
Hello my baby, hello my honey.
It's like, we're totally open, and hey, you know what? If you just want to say nice things to us, we're totally open to that too. And I guess
God
honestly,
knows we need it.
If you even want to say mean things, I mean, maybe you should reevaluate your life. But no, but helpful criticisms we're certainly open to. But yes, we'd love to hear from you. And I think these two lessons are going to be fun, and it's really exciting that we get to tackle some different content moving forward. So I guess,
with that out of the way, let's talk about
let's do it.
The first point he makes, which again, it's something that he kind of reiterates several times through the whole masterclass about be your own film school.
Be your own film school. Film schools around the world just love Werner Herzog. I think
he's their spokesperson. But I mean, I think that the what we've said again is quite in line with that. For those of you who don't know, who I've mentioned this a few times, but maybe might be missed or forgotten, but so I do teach a film class to high school students.
You traitor.
Exactly. I know. How dare I? But I, of course, always naturally, because they're like most of my students are either, finishing high school or in early high school. I inevitably get a lot of questions about film school because these kids are naturally moving on to that stage of their life.
Right.
So I get this question all the time about do I go to film school? Did you go to film school? Did blah, 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 blah. Neither me or you went to film school.
Correct.
But what I always say is I'm not quite on the total anti-film school stance that Herzog's on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more I think that for me, had I gone to film school, I don't think I would have gotten value out of it. Because so much of it was so much what I spent my life doing before I had the opportunity to go to any film schools was doing exactly what they teach you, in self-teaching. But there are a lot of people who either don't have the opportunity to do that, or don't have the, I was lucky enough to have friends that were really into film, so I could make movies with them. There are some people that don't have that
or access to equipment, or absolutely. I think some of the things that Herzog points out, I think, are important to reiterate here. I mean, just that, generally speaking, any film school that you're going to go to of any decent repute is going to be very expensive.
Yeah.
At least to me, I guess, obviously this is going to be relative depending on a person's specific financial situation, but
and I mean, speaking, especially geographically too.
It's a lot of money. And I do believe that in today's day and age, there is there's a tremendous amount of information available to most of us. If you have access to a computer and the internet, you have access to an extraordinary wealth of information, in regards to, the technical, logistical aspects of filmmaking. And Herzog mentions in this lesson, it's like, hey, you can learn the fundamentals of filmmaking in a couple weeks. And I think, if you consider essentials, kind of like the bare bones of, how do you turn on a camera and how do you operate it, and
what are the different shot types and things like that.
2 weeks is a little short. I think it's going to take you a little bit longer if you're actually, going to operate camera. You're going to be editing. You're going to work in some kind of post-production. I mean, it's going to take you a little more than 2 weeks, but I think for the most part, this kind of stands. You can certainly learn how to operate a camera. You can learn the fundamentals of how to set up shots. You can learn the fundamentals of kind of story structure and writing.
Quite quickly and quite for free.
and there are software options available for free or very low cost that you can use to edit your own work at home. There's tons of tutorial videos for how to use this software. And then, heck, at the end of it all, you have a kind of a way to distribute it. You can
a little
put it on
repertoire
YouTube for nothing. Or
I mean, and that to me is also, that's the thing. So because I have applied to film schools and mostly in the States, so I do know the expenses there. It's much cheaper here.
Yeah.
But even so, things. it's still quite expensive. For an investment. And I think that you could spend, it's about $7,000 a year here.
Do you remember kind of what some of those programs cost here in the U.S.? Because I've never. Oh yeah,
well, so USC is something like $70,000. That's out of state, and that was also for me coming from Canada. Yeah, a year. Okay. NYU was something like $40,000. UT, so UT Austin, something like 30, high 40s, maybe, or high 30s, 40s.
And this is very expensive. 4-year program, right? These are 4-year programs, and this is not room and board.
So take that money and put it into a movie. Is essentially
well, that's and that's certainly what Herzog suggests. And
but in here, even though it's like, so here it would be more, to go to a film school here, it's about $7,000. I would say $7,000 to $10,000 a semester, a year. What was that?
Nothing to sneeze at, though. Still,
no, totally, and that's what I mean, is that you can still take the $10,000 that you're putting in to go to film school here, if you're Canadian, or if you're in Europe somewhere, put that into a movie. And that's kind of, or I mean, at the end of the day too, what I always tell my students is like, look up, these curriculums are all freely available online. Look them up, research the school that you're looking at, because a lot of times it is also just like, whether it's someone's parents pushing them to just get a degree or something like that. Sure. But just look up these curriculums and go, am I going to learn something? Right. Or rather, is it worth what I'm learning there worth the amount of money that I would spend on it, or can I better spend my time and save money and learn more? Which is what I did. I mean,
there's one other aspect of this that we haven't touched on yet, but I think maybe the only thing, I'm not sure. There's a couple of things I think you can't replicate with the DIY approach. The first is, and these are both really closely related, basically. And the first is kind of, and I really don't want to, like, relationship building. I don't want to use this word networking, and we're going to get to this later on in more detail because it's part of these lessons. But relationship building, you're going to be within a group of a lot of people who are wanting to be filmmakers. Ideally, the program, let's say you do take this route, your teachers, the professors, the faculty there hopefully have had real world experience. They've actually had some success in the industry. And so they actually have contacts where there's intern placement or job placement programs there at the school to help you start your career whenever you've graduated. Some of those things are really important. And developing real long-term relationships with those faculty and your peers can really give you a powerful leg up.
Yeah.
And we're, like I said, we're going to go into that in more detail, but I think that's the part that you can't replicate in the same way.
You don't have the infrastructure.
Obviously, you're going to develop your own relationships, of course. As you work, you're going to develop your own relationships, but it's a massive opportunity.
But perhaps that leads us into our next point, which is really important, which is, again, kind of like I just said, where what's great about film school is that you have infrastructure for meeting people and for working with people and for renting equipment. Like, it's all there for you.
They hold your hand for you.
But
if you don't have that,
what's difficult outside of it is that you don't have that. But that doesn't mean that you can't make it. And Herzog makes a really interesting point, which is about that nowadays so few young people make their own. They don't make their own production companies. They don't, form labor movements or labor unions and things like that. So it's a point that really speaks to me because I've spent the last 3 or so years building up my own production company. With other people, like not just solely me. And I think that to me has been like a godsend. Like I don't think I'd be doing nearly the stuff that I'm doing right now if I didn't kind of invest into the infrastructure of being able to make movies with other people under a banner and under something that's organized and not just me going to friends being like, I got this script, let's do something.
Or waiting for somebody to invite you to be a part of a production. And that's what I think a lot of people do is that they wait, whatever part you want to play in the filmmaking process. If you want to be a director, or if you want to be an actor, if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a DP, any of these positions, I think a lot of people have a tendency to wait to be invited, right?
Yes. They sit on Facebook looking at like casting calls and think that one day they're going to get.
You're constantly submitting, you're working on your reel and your resume and your, and I guess there's nothing wrong with that to an extent, of course, but at least for me, I was made keenly aware of the fact that I had to take my own initiative if I was ever going to have any kind of career and get to do anything in this industry when I set out to pursue acting at first, right? And, the way I first did that, of course, was, I did everything that I was quote unquote supposed to do. I took my classes, I got my professional headshots, I went out to these, did all my mailings and went to, workshops and all this kind of jazz. And it was all my energy was put into, please, God, somebody invite me.
Somebody
to
notice
be a part
me.
of this process. Please, somebody let me be a part of filmmaking. Please let me be a part of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And I had already had strong interest in doing other aspects of filmmaking, including directing, but it was really that process of several years of having to beg to be invited to be a part of the process that I finally realized, look, if I don't take my own initiative, if I don't start writing my own material, producing my own material, shooting my own material, if I won't have any. Who knows how long I'm going to have to sit here and wait. And I saw, of course, a lot of my friends with the same thing. And so there was a group of us that continued to just do the same thing. They just kept submitting. They kept working on getting agents or changing agents. They kept,
I think it's interesting too that you mentioned like the reels, because I think that so many people, that's like their end goal. They're shooting everything to put in their reel. They're shooting, they're anything that they do. It's I'm going to put this in my reel. I've found the success that I've had with making connections and stuff has always been from just showing people things that I've made in full, not just showing someone a reel. Showing somebody, okay, here's a short that I did last year, and letting them watch. What's the point of making someone watch a 4-minute reel if you could just make them watch an 8-minute short film that you did? And
well,
have
it has
that
a
full
big
experience,
difference on who you're giving it to, right?
Yes,
so,
yeah.
If you are talking to somebody that you actually know in real life, that you have a relationship with in some way, whether you've worked on a project before together, or maybe you have, just a 1 or 2 degree separation. And, we're going to talk a lot about the importance of relationships and long-term vision of your career. So if you're looking at somebody like that, they're going to watch an 8-minute short. But the challenge is that a lot of people are shooting off their reels to people that, again, they're falling back to that previous category about they're begging somebody to give them a chance, to give them a shot. And those people who don't know you from Adam or Eve, who, are looking at, literally 10,000 submissions or for an actor, but maybe it's, 100 or 1,000 for a DP or director or something, but they're looking through tons of them. They're definitely not going to watch an 8-minute short film of yours. And so that's why people put these sizzles together, right? Because they know they're sending them off to somebody who's literally going to turn it off and go to the next one in 2 seconds if it doesn't grab their attention. So, that's
what's really important is you kind of have to, at some point, and as vague and as broad as it sounds, is like make your own opportunities.
Of course you do. Absolutely.
And I think that's what's really, again, going back to this idea of like found your own production company, get a group of people together, and
if you don't write,
even if you sign papers, sign. And say like, hey, we're gonna work together. We're gonna make that's basically what United Artists was. I mean,
sure.
You think of how successfully that went, and it's about, it doesn't have to be all about financials. It doesn't have to be all about, we're gonna be a business and we're all about branding and we're gonna get X and Y, Z.
When you're really in the beginning, I think a lot of people tend to or some people focus a lot on that, about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if, they get worried about stuff that is, let's face it, frankly, very unlikely to occur. Yeah. How many points do you get? I think, and we've talked about this in a previous lesson, keep that stuff very, 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 very simple, and don't spend a ton of time on it. Just make it simple. If you're
avoid legalese and all that. Yeah.
Don't put a lot of legalese and BS into this. What you should be spending your time on is finding that story and putting a small team of people together who can execute it. And so it's like I was going to say, if you are a writer, then great, write. If you're not a writer, then go find one and work with them. If you don't want a DP, or and you feel like that's not a part of your repertoire as a director, then you go and find a DP that you can work well with. Find a group of actors that you can work well with, and build a team of people who have similar mindsets and attitudes about filmmaking. And it's going to take time.
Well, and I think
we say this, and it's like it's easy to say, but it's taken me a decade. Plus.
Well, and I exactly wanted to mention that too, because we're talking. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot, and what Herzog talks about a lot, is like go out and do it. But we never, we've kind of never really talked about the struggles and the difficulties. So I'll talk about right now is what with my production company is. Oh, totally, and rejection and all that. But for me, I'm right now, we've been doing it for 3 years professionally. I mean, I've been making movies for much longer than that, but since, actually kind of incepting this production company, it's been about 3 years.
Yeah.
And we're just working right now in pre-production on our first feature, but there's a lot of difficulty with that. It comes down to, like, we don't have, I'm not going to go out and tell anyone to just go out and make a movie and throw all their money into it, because, well, I can't do that, and most people can't.
Right.
Whereas what I've found, though, that makes my life a lot easier is, taking it slow, not feeling any need to rush into it, because there was a point, months ago where I could have just been like, yeah, our script's done, let's go film this, at a friend's house, and we've got a feature. And it's like, no, I do not want to do that, and nobody should just want to rush anything. I think that's something that there's a difference between having drive and initiative and rushing. There's a really big difference. And so that's one thing I've pushed back the shoot date multiple times, both because of the pandemic and because of just preparation.
Right. Yeah.
So that's of course been a challenge.
So take initiative, but be prepared.
And I mean, even the idea, I know that you had the one that you're working on right now has done a successful crowdfunding campaign, and that's something that we've spoken about when it comes to the production of the feature I'm working on. But we're taking a little bit of a different approach, which is let's try to do this all on our own, and at the point where we need financing, then we can look into crowdfunding and stuff like that. So kind of the opposite, I guess, order of steps.
There's so many different ways to do it, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But the point is, you're taking initiative. And I think you bring up a really good point. Because we have talked so much about urgency throughout this entire series. It's something that Herzog clearly has very strong opinions about. And I think you're right. It's a good point that you can work with urgency, absolutely. And I think taking initiative with urgency is so vital. Those two things go so hand in hand together. But also, though, being prepared. I mean, Herzog has spent years preparing for some of his films. It's not...
Well, he says about the first, everyone says, I loved your first movie, Aguirre. It was so great. And he says, that was my 11th.
It's my 11th. Right, right. Exactly. And so that's a really good point to make. It's take initiative, but also take some time. Work with a sense of urgency, but be prepared. Learn from your mistakes, because you're gonna make a lot, and you're also going to have a lot of rejection. That's something that Herzog talks a lot about here in this lesson 24. And boy, it's funny, because I feel like I am an expert on very few things, but holy crap, am I an expert on failure. Or rejection, let's say. Rejection. And it feels like failure. And that this is an interesting kind of part psychologically about this. But yeah, I mean, as I've said numerous times before, I started working toward a career professionally as a storyteller, in acting. That's where I first, I'm in LA, I've got a professional agents. I am, actively pursuing a career as an actor in the LA market, boom, I'm there, right? Wow. Oh my gosh. I mean, up until that point in my life, and I was younger, but not too young. I mean, I was 30 years old by the time I was in LA, in market, pursuing a professional acting career. So it's not like I had not lived before. It wasn't like I just fell off the truck.
Yeah, you weren't just out of high school.
I had had a decade-long professional career in the corporate world in software before that. And so it's not like I was spring chicken. And wow, the amount of rejection that I was hit with like a Mack truck, just over and over and over. What I wasn't prepared for. Frankly, I just was not prepared for it, and it knocked me off my feet, and it took me years to recover from that experience. And so I feel so strongly about this. And you may say, well, acting is way different, and it's not. Filmmaking is just a ruthless profession. It is extremely difficult if you want to make a living. Cut and dry. Yeah. If you want to make a living doing any of these things, it is extremely difficult. If you want any kind of any decently sized audience to ever see any of your work, it is exceedingly difficult. It is so hard. Now, it's worth it. But how you address rejection is so important to if you're even going to survive. I cannot tell you how it's been such an interesting experience to be in that position myself, and to see how that rejection affected me, and to see how it affected so many of my friends, and to see the different types of reactions to it. It's just really been eye-opening. I mean, for me personally, it was, I went into this and I'm thinking, okay, I know you get a lot of rejection. I know you get, and I was trying to prepare myself psychologically, and I had some mentors who had been in the industry, and, I had been preparing for this for a while, right? So it wasn't just like a on a whim kind of decision to go out there. I mean, I had been preparing for about a decade, and I had worked in theater before that, and in significant places, and in Colorado and Denver. And so I'd had a sense of these things, right? It's not that I didn't have a sense of it, but even with all of that, I was completely blown away, man. I mean, I have a spreadsheet that I used to keep of every audition that I ever went on, right? And I would keep track of, which casting director brought me in, and what project was it for, and how did I feel like the audition went, and, and what happened, right? Did I get a call back? Did I book the job, whatever? So I could see, I had a record, right? And I can't remember now exactly what my ratio was, but suffice it to say, I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of no's, just over and over and over and
that's exactly what's important too about this whole like the amount of times that I've made a movie and been like, this is the best thing I've ever made, and still, like you said, still sort of like while submitting to festivals or whatever, kind of going, okay, I'm prepared to not, it's festivals, but still it feels kind of crushing when you get that rejection, when you get,
yes, it does.
Especially when it's like okay, this one's really good, this one's gonna go in. With that though, and I think this is one of the points that Herzog really drives home too, which I think is really important, is that you shouldn't make movies for festivals. I've never once, when I'm making a movie, cut something or change something because I've thought that like a festival screener isn't going to like it. I have always, maybe that's something that I should work on myself, but I it's something that I still believe that like I I'm not interested in the art. I have a friend who went to film school, and I think I've spoken about this before on the podcast, but his note is always, because of his his teachers and professors and stuff, they would always say, your festival thing should be as short as possible. And so his note is always like, cut 2 minutes, just like arbitrarily cut 2 minutes. And I'm always like, I don't care if a festival thinks the other thing too about that though, and there's a video on YouTube somewhere about this, but it actually talks about the most successful festival movies and the movies that get to, like, the short films, that get to the Oscars and stuff. They're almost always above 15 minutes. The Oscar shorts are almost always, whereas everyone says that sweet spot is 8, just under 8 minutes for festivals.
Well, everybody's got an idea of what the sweet spot is.
Yeah, and so I think that's really interesting, is that, like, you should take any information like that with a grain of salt, because sure, does your film have a greater likelihood of getting into a festival if it's 4 minutes than if it's 10? Yes, because they want to fit as many movies in and slots in. But with that being said, does that actually impact the amount of reverence that your film will have there? No, because if your film is short, it's often just going to be washed in with all the other really short films, and people whereas if you make something great, that's like,
Yeah, well, I mean, this is an important point, and I'll kind of extrapolate this, or I'll kind of raise this up to even kind of more encompassing level. I mean, look, we're talking about rejection now, and we're talking about, this, I really can't overstate. You cannot overstate how important it is to steel yourself and fortify yourself against rejection, because there's so many so many ways that it affects people, and it's not just cut and dry binary, like, well, you're either in the game or you're out of the game, and as long as you just stay in the game, you have defeated rejection. No, a lot of people get, in many very different ways, they get kind of jaded, cynical. They get, you're trying to second guess an audience. You're just describing somebody trying to, guess what the judges are looking for in this film festival, and then gear their content to that. And that's such a horrifically cynical, nasty way to make art, in my
especially considering opinion. That festivals are hardly ever the way to get into a further career, unless you are somehow so successful that you're going to get into one of, like, the big 6,
right?
Which are Sundance, TIFF, Con, maybe South by Southwest, and like Tribeca or something like that, right. or in a few other international ones.
Yeah.
Unless you are successful enough to get a prime slot in any of those, because I also know people who have gotten into those, even like TIFF, who have gotten into those, but their movies playing in a tiny theater at 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, and it's
right.
6 people went to it. So I think that what you should focus on, I think what you're saying, what I'm saying, what Herzog has always said,
the story in your heart is what you should focus on.
Well, and I'll quote him directly here, which is, create something with so much substance that the film itself can take the punches. And that's so important, because you should just don't strive to make something that, again, like you said, that, okay, is the judge going to love it?
Don't reverse engineer your art. Don't reverse engineer.
Just make something that's really good. And you know what? One of the time I just got into a festival the other day with the documentary that I've been doing, a short documentary, but it's 18 minutes. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you, had I shown that to people and said, like, yeah, I'm trying to get into festivals, like, give me some feedback, so many people would have been like, can't be 18 minutes. It should be 10 minutes.
Right.
I guarantee that. But I just got in on an 18-minute thing because I put a lot of heart into it, and I put, I think I thought it was a really strong documentary, and I think that it's, and I was really happy with it. And so I got in, and it feels tough. Really great, but
it's really easy to say. It's like, I really sympathize, because I've been there myself. I've been there myself as an actor in the extreme, where I tried everything I could possibly think of to change myself, to guess what the casting directors wanted, to like fit myself into some mold that I thought was going to work, and I did it over and over and over and over. And so I just want to kind of reiterate, it's not that, like, you should feel sorry for me, but that, like, I really do understand the temptation that comes when you're rejected over and over again, and you're second guessing yourself, and you're trying to find a way to make your way in this art. Like, all you want to do is make films, and you can't find a way to do it, and the world is telling you no. It's it's totally understandable. I've been there myself, and maybe it's just a process that everybody kind of has to go through on their own, right?
Because it's also super important too, what Herzog says too is about don't only spend your time doing this. Well, he tells the story about the guy that he met that has been in like 100 festivals, and he's just following it around. And Herzog says, in the time that you've been following your movie around at festivals and submitting and spending money, you could have made 3 movies.
More films.
And that's exactly like I submit to a festival and I forget about it. I step back, maybe if there's communication that I need to update or something with them, then I will. But I submit a movie. If I am going to submit it to a festival, I submit it and I forget about it. And I immediately go on to my next project.
It's so huge because there's a couple, look, like having a life that's outside of this bubble is so important for a couple big reasons.
Yeah.
For one is that you've always got to be filling your well. And you can't just be working in the industry or working toward the industry or making films you have to have a life. You have to have a life that you can pull new poetry from, that you can create new images from when you are making film. And I know a lot of people just get obsessed and they're like, I know some filmmakers who it's like they have their day schedule. It's like, I wake up at 5 a.m. and then I write for 2 hours, and then I make phone calls to my, to potential agents for 2 hours. And it's like their entire day is just filled because they're like, I have to make it. And this is how I have to make it. I have to outwork the next person. I have, like kind of the Will Smith kind of mentality, right? If you've ever seen Will Smith,
grind. It's all about the grind. Like, you wake up and
he's like, I'm successful because I stayed on the treadmill longer than anybody else. I just ran and ran and ran. And I'm like, well, interestingly, look at what kind of actor he is, and that it's telling, I think, that that's his attitude. But
I will always say that it's more I've
got to
said
have
this to my students. I've said it's more about your skill set than it is about your like blind perseverance. And I say blind perseverance because there are people that just think that
perseverance is important, but
it's totally important. But that there's this mindset that people like get into, just like you just said, this kind of, and not to put down Will Smith or anything, but but this mindset of like, as long as I just have to keep going and I have to keep trying and I got to keep climbing that mountain. It's like, while you're climbing this mountain, are you also working on your skills? Are you also going out and working on other skills?
Are you spending time with your significant other, with your family? Yeah. Are you out enjoying sunsets? Are you eating an ice cream cone on the beach? Are you traveling? Are you
just having different interests? I went to, so I didn't go to film school, but I went to university. I went to the University of Toronto for criminology. I didn't finish the degree, but I went, and people always asked me when I was going there, it was like, are you going because it's something that you're, something to do with film? You're going for criminology because you like crime dramas. And no, I went to go to criminology because I was interested in it. It's the same with, I have a desire by the end of my 20s to have my pilot's license. Got nothing to do with movies. It's an interest of mine. I like politics. I like law. I like history. These are all things that I will spend time reading about and doing, not so that I can generate ideas for movies, just because I'm interested in them.
You can fill the well, and also it is, Herzog talks about filling yourself with philosophy, with poetry, as a kind of like a prophylactic against burnout and against all this rejection. And this is that. Taking the time to follow other interests, to pursue other curiosities, to work on relationships with people in your life, your significant other, your family, your friends. To be outside in the world, to travel, it's just as, if not more important, to do those things than it is to do all the other filmmaking things combined.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it's just, I have known so many people pursuing different positions, different careers, but in the filmmaking world. And I can't tell you how common it is that people get so single-minded, they get so on one track, and not only does it ultimately not end up being successful as far as having quote-unquote success in your career, but it also is not successful in the sense that it makes a really miserable person.
It's not fulfilling.
You're going to take this to a place where it's no longer fun. And
I know people exactly who have burned out.
And we have this weird in our culture, kind of Western culture, and I'm speaking only from that because that's where I'm kind of born and raised, and it's what I know more about. So this might exist in other cultures, but I just can't speak for it because I'm not as tuned in. But But in our culture here, we have this weird idea of what creativity is, and that it has to be obsession, and that you have to like do nothing but, right? It's like if you're a
we
filmmaker,
romanticize that like psychotic person typing on their laptop with a cigarette, and you know, yeah.
Right. And it's like, you can't have a life but anything other. I mean, and I literally remember, I remember being told over and over by different people when I had first moved to LA, and I was, you know, doing all the things, and I had fallen into that trap a bit myself. You know, people would tell me, it's like, well, you can't have a relationship if you're going to do this. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't spend time on these other things.
Oh God, it's insane.
And of course, these people were miserable themselves, because that's what they were doing, and they were miserable. So I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but guys, ladies, everybody, if you know, to be a filmmaker is not to just cut out everything in your life. What's the point of making a film if you have no life to tell stories from?
Yeah.
So, all right.
and to tell stories too. I want to double back real quick too. Just one more point on the festivals thing as well.
Yeah.
Because I worked at TIFF in 2019.
Right. Yeah.
And there's this line that Herzog says in here that he doesn't really get into too much depth about, but I think that I can kind of speak to, which is about festivals are self-centered. And he talks about this idea that, you know, festivals are...
Well, they're a business.
They're a bit... Exactly. And so me and you talked about this before, but disregarding the idea too, even that there's 4,000 plus festivals that go on every year, I mean, to anybody that's insane. Of course, not every single one of those festivals. In fact, very, 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 very few of them are going to actually have the publicity to get you anywhere off
very
of them.
few.
And so there's kind of like that, again, there's those big six that I kind of mentioned earlier. So I worked at TIFF, which is the Toronto International Film Festival, which is by attendance the largest film festival in the world.
I didn't know that. Oh.
And yeah, it's something like 400,000 or something a year. Whoa. People go to it. It's a huge event.
Yeah.
And so I worked there, and I sort of got this inside look at you know, how are these festivals self-centered, and the way that they are is they've become so much less about, and you know, I'm not trying to sound like an old man, because I certainly wasn't alive in those days.
That's my job, man.
But I can actually kind of vouch for the idea that, like, back in the day, they were different. They were, you know, when these festivals started up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even, you know, the early 2000s, they were very much about rising up and coming stars. Mm-hmm. This day and age, most of the big festivals are headlined by blockbusters that are so like Joker, Jojo Rabbit, Knives Out, you know, all these huge movies that are produced by Universal and Fox and all this. And it's like, I always just kind of, and I understand from a business standpoint why the festivals do it, because they get a ton of money, a ton of advertising, a ton of, you know, butts and seats for this.
It's good.
But what really pains me is just that I'm like, imagine giving one of those slots to somebody who made a really beautiful, wonderful film and who has no chance. And it's like, and there absolutely are people like that who have submitted, who have been seen by these judges, who are now on the cutting block because it's not going to make them enough money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a business decision, man.
Yeah. And a friend of mine, actually, perhaps a success story from this, a friend of mine recently released, well, he was in TIFF with his co-directing partner in TIFF in 2019, the one that I worked at for his film White Lie, which had a budget of about $1.5 million, which was their biggest so far, undoubtedly. And they're very independent and stuff like that, but this is a huge budget for them.
Absolutely.
And so they got in, and I remember I went to their premiere. It was great. There was a lot of people in the theater, and they've gotten a theatrical release from it, and it's wonderful, and it's like really heartwarming to see, because it still can happen. You can make it happen. It's just so difficult. And I think a big part of that too is, and this isn't related to festivals, but I think it's related to the environment that, and the kind of ecosystem of entertainment and film in particular these days, that Herzog also mentions the idea that before movies, rather than commercials, they used to play short films. And I think that it's like, I look at somewhere like the New Beverly, the theater that Quentin Tarantino owns,
which
I think, like, you know, I don't know what his financials are there at all, so I don't know how much he depends on.
It loses money as far as
so it does.
know.
Okay, so it does.
Yeah,
lose.
He subsidizes. I think.
But I know that
there
are other movie theaters that I've been to and I've heard of that don't show commercials. That it's like their policy, they don't show commercials, and they operate at a loss because it's usually it's usually run by someone like Tarantino. Maybe they're not a director, but they're a businessman who can afford to lose the money.
Yeah.
What I think would be so cool, and I think it would be great, is if we went back to that. Like, imagine how cool it would be for a young filmmaker who makes a short film to have their film shown at the New Beverly just before. And it's like one of those things that it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be crazy.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an event. Well, it would just be so nice to be able to open up the doors to people who have otherwise, the most impossible time breaking into an industry.
Well, and so obviously we could talk about this a little bit, that, there are other distribution channels.
Yes.
And Herzog talks about, this, of course, like of course everybody is striving. Well, I actually can't say that. I don't know. Maybe there are directors out there now who are younger who could care less about a theatrical release. I don't know, maybe, but it certainly my generation and before, every
that was the be-all
dream was that you would have a theatrical release. I mean, that's to see, the whole point is to see your film on the big screen, right? And to have a communal experience in a, with an audience in a theater. And with this, we don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, because there's a whole conversation we could have, and maybe we will in another episode, about, the difference between watching a film at home on your television and watching it with an audience in a theater. But that was the dream. Now we're having to adjust. It's very unlikely. And when I say very unlikely, that's an understatement. I mean, it's almost an impossibility that you as a director are going to have a film that is going to be theatrically released, at least, unless you rent a theater and pay them to play it, right?
Yeah.
Some people do that for sure. But outside of that, to have an actual wide release is extremely rare. Very few films do. Now, there are a lot of online distribution possibilities, but even that is very challenging. It can look like a great opportunity, and it is, but
who knows, maybe you sell your movie to Netflix and it's buried behind hundreds and hundreds of other titles,
and they're right. And so there are some more distribution opportunities, but they still are very, very difficult. And even if, like you said, and even if they do, I mean, I know people who've have their films on Amazon Prime or Netflix or Hulu, or there are many different places now. And, there's like, their metrics are like almost nothing. Like, nobody will watch it for months and months and months, because they're not curated into, top of mind for people. So they sit down at the bottom of, 5 million different TV shows and movies. And just nobody's ever going to find it. So it's tough no matter which way you cut it. But
perhaps I'm an optimist too.
Yeah.
I might, but I think what's really exciting about right now, is that the landscape is changing so much. And I think that whether due to the pandemic or not, I think that you're going to see a pretty big upkick, honestly, in independent theaters, because I think a lot of these multiplexes are losing a lot of money. I think that with this whole push to streaming, I think what you're going to see is smaller, independent, more financially viable theaters. And I that to me, and I at least that's something that I've seen a lot in Toronto lately, is that there's like this huge upkick in small independent theaters that show, independent film, which is great. I mean, and it gives those movies an opportunity to be seen on the big screen. So maybe I'm just an optimist, but I think
I would love it. I would love it.
And I think we're kind of almost in like a new Wild West of the industry right now with online distribution, like where nobody's quite sure where it's going to go, and how it's going to play out. Which I think,
it's interesting.
Can be sort of I think that right now is a perfect time to make of it what you can, and to kind of take advantage of every single avenue that you can take advantage of. Whether that's online, YouTube. I mean, that's the other thing too, is like, you look at the landscape of YouTube, how much that changed over the past 10 years, where back when I started on YouTube in 2008, it was like, you would see short films on the recommended page. You would see people's short films on the homepage, like being, top 10 videos of the week, and it's someone's, World War II short or something. And now that's almost impossible. Now it's all lifestyle, it's blogs, or political clickbait, because that's where the money was. But I think that, again, I think there's definitely a pendulum swing. And I think that right now I see us kind of at the precipice of this really, really clickbaity, everything's flashy, everything's lifestyle. I think we're slowly now starting to swing backwards into, it's kind of like, I sort of relate it to like the analog renaissance of, people going out and getting records again, and people going out and shooting on film again, and people, picking up, old Polaroids. I'm not a psychic. I don't know if it's going to happen. And again, but I figure if you're not hopeful about it, then you're just going to drive yourself insane. So
it's it's a combination of, it's it's interesting too, and Herzog makes film. He makes movies, but he has made things for television. Mm-hmm. I think
made things for streaming.
He clearly makes things for streaming, and so part of it is being willing enough to be to be flexible. So it's but finding that, and it's kind of right. This is just the way it is with all of the creative process. It's kind of where do you draw your line with your content and with your vision, but allowing flexibility to come in so that you don't define success so narrowly for yourself that it's impossible. Mm-hmm. So maybe yes, you're not going to be a director who has their films on 2,600 screens across the country, but maybe you've got a film that you have your own website and you've set up your own, I know some people who actually, instead of selling it to some other VOD distributor, they distribute it themselves. They set up a paywall. They have their own website. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's only 1,000 people or something watch the film for $5 a pop, but maybe that's a start. So it's being flexible.
My website has a paid. I'm starting to put movies that I'm making that I think are warranted of money or payment. I'm putting them on my website for $1. And it's not like I'm asking a lot, but I think that it's a way to at least generate something and some buzz. I think also, and maybe to segue a little bit here, we talked a lot about skill set. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that we very much agree on is this idea that people, they will put a goal in their mind of like, I want to make a movie, like I want to be a filmmaker,
right?
And they don't really know what that entails. And I've actually dealt with this a lot.
Usually it's like, I want to be Steven Spielberg. It's usually something.
And that's what I said when I was 3 years old. Literally, that was my response to when somebody asked me what I wanted. I said I wanted to be Steven Spielberg. But I've actually dealt with this a lot recently in my like work life, which is this idea of, and especially with students of mine and stuff, where it's their desire, it's like, I want to direct. And it's like, well, a good director understands, in the slightest, every other position on set, and is able to communicate those things, and mm-hmm. is able to understand, how a camera works, and how a lighting crew does their job, and how a sound crew does their job, and costumes, and you don't have to be an expert. And I think that's something we've reiterated several times on here, is that you don't have to go in and be an expert at special effects, but you should be able to communicate. It's about being able to communicate with those people. And it's also about, within the line of my production company, is what I've tried to really stress, and what everyone's been very much on board with, is that we all have different talents. We all have special, things mm-hmm. that we're good at. And so that, let's say, my good friend Blair, who is one of the producers on the feature film we're doing, if we're doing a short film that Blair is directing and that I'm not directing, then I can jump in and do the cinematography for it and operate camera. Mandy, who is a really talented director, she's like a fantastic first
Mandy.
AD as well. Yeah, say hello to Mandy.
I don't know her, but I'm just saying.
But I mean, that's the thing, is that
she's listening.
She's a fantastic first AD. So when she's off, not directing, she's putting her skills in. My other friend Michael is like a fantastic ideas man. Like, he just comes up with ideas constantly. And so that's kind of when you're trying to make yourself valuable to people, and you're trying to make yourself, or rather invaluable to people. And you want people to make sure that they want you on their set, and they want to be working with you at all times. Then find out a way to do that, and find out a way to expand your skill sets, so that you don't just kind of come in and go, well, I've studied direction, and I know about shot types and shot composition, and I know all about directing actors and stuff. Like, really, work with yourself so that you can kind of expand that skill set.
And I think a parallel to this, or it goes right along hand in hand with what you're saying, is that you've got to know what you want. You really do have to know what you want. Now, again, I'll use an analogy of my past life as an actor. So many, I hit the streets in LA, and it's kind of like, you kind of like, it's almost like classes, right? I'm like the class of 2000 or whatever, and there's like another 200,000 people that just fall off the bus onto the streets in LA every year with you, right? And I saw this happen. It's like, almost everybody that fell off that bus with me when I was there, all these new, young, aspiring actors didn't know what in the world they actually really wanted to do. It's like you said, they're just like, well, I want to be an actor. Okay.
What does that entail?
But what does that? Well, but do you want to be a stage actor? Do you want to be? Do you want to act in television? Because television and film acting are so different. Do you want to do commercials? Do you want to do voiceover? Do you want to do mocap? Do you want to do? And they're like, well, I'm an actor. I'll do anything. Well,
the other thing too is
you've gotta hone in. I just want to, it's like
and learn what's fulfilling to you.
There's a big difference, right? And it's not just, it's about what do you, really understanding what do you actually want to do? What are you actually interested in? Because it is very different. Do you want to do soaps? Because doing soaps and doing single camera drama are radically different. Do you really want to be in commercials? Because that's a full-time job pursuing commercials as it is, and it's very different process than auditioning for legit theatrical stuff. It's very different. So,
and perhaps let me also, I can just to relate to myself as well. One of the things that I think that I am good at is that there are very few things in the industry that I don't like. I would be happy working as a camera technician at Panavision.
But is that what you want to do?
And that's what I mean.
But are you going to pursue that?
And that's
so much time.
No, and that's what I mean. But what I mean is that it's like if I was stuck doing that, I wouldn't feel like I have such a varying interest in it. There are things, of course, that I don't want to do. So, for example, when I worked at TIFF, I was doing live cam. It was like TV, live TV camera operation. Okay. I hated it. I have no interest in doing that. So I know that there's no interest there. And I mean, it paid well, but I have no interest in doing that as a career. Right. And I think that's what you kind of have to think about.
Well, you have to maintain focus. You have to, you can't just try. Hopefully, right. You tried this thing because you were kind of put in a position where you had to do it and you realize you don't like it. Okay. And you cut yourself off from that and you move forward. It's just, everything, it's such a difficult industry to get into. You are going to make it harder if you don't really analyze, like have a heart to heart with yourself and say, okay, what do I actually really want out of this? And then focus on that some more. But I'll even raise it above kind of this practical idea of, okay, well, what do I really want to do as far as, the exact role that you want to have, but why are you here doing this?
Yes.
Because one of the things that I found, this was a huge kind of revelation to me, and maybe it's because I'm slow and maybe other people understood this really quickly. But, when I first started acting, I was focused on almost everything but the story. So I was focused on how I looked, how I sounded. I was focused on my headshot. I was focused on my resume. I was focused on the casting director and what was their background and could I find some common ground, and I was focused on pitching myself to them, and I was focused on everything but the story. And as a filmmaker, you've got to focus on the story because, and you mentioned this a little bit early, if your focus is on the story, that's going to carry you through so much. Focus on the story.
And the beauty of it. I mean, that's the thing is too, when I say story, like when I say to my students or whatever, focus on this, like the story is what matters. It is the storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think people often too get that confused where they're like, I just have to write a really good screenplay and that's what matters. Whereas, and I think that you agree, which is when I say that, it's the storytelling. And and that involves so much within the film. Like if you're going to make a film, a really good film, and you're trying to, which I think everyone is trying to, unless you're doing like Birdemic 3 or whatever. I think a lot of it is that you have to kind of pull all the stops. If I have a really, really great screenplay, it doesn't stop there. I'm going to try and make the cinematography as beautiful as I can. I'm going to try and make sure that the performances are as strong as I can make them. And I think that a lot of people, again, like they focus on one of my least favorite things that I hear, and I hear this so often, especially from people who are either in film school or had graduated film school, which is they'll say, X is key.
Right,
so I've heard people say location is key. Location is the key to the movie.
The top 3 secrets to successful
and
filmmaking.
it's this thing that I hear so often, and it's like, no, nothing is key. Everything is important. You just have to make sure that you don't overthink it too.
I think I agree with you, but my angle is slightly different. What I do mean is that the story is everything. And I hear what you're saying. You're saying, well, the storytelling, but I do think of it a little bit differently. So let me just speak to it a tad bit more.
Sure.
So to continue my analogy, when I was worried about all these other external things, when I would go into audition or even perform, sadly, sometimes, I wasn't being propelled by the story. Okay. By the story. And when I started to learn to make the shift to not forget all of those things, but to approach all of those things from a place of being completely captivated and involved in the story I was telling as an actor, things started to change radically. And so to translate that to being a director, when you are so spellbound, so captivated, so inside the story that you're telling, and that's the place that you're moving from for all of these different, you had mentioned, it's not just the script, it's the cinematography, it's the acting performances, it's the this. Of course it is. But when you're moving to those places, when your motivation for those things is coming from a place of absolute captivation and necessity from the story, I think that's when you're really on fire. And I think that's the kind of films that people recognize they're different. And I think people recognize the difference of that kind of motivation. And those are the stories that at least have a fighting chance of cutting through the static of all the stuff that we've talked about now, the millions of films that are out there, the thousands that are released a year, all of the challenges. If you don't have that, you are really, I would even ask, I would say, what's the point? What's even the point of telling the story? Unless you are so captivated by it, you have no choice but to tell it. Every time I've worked on a film and I've come at, or a role, and I've come at it from that place, it was a joy regardless of what the outcome was. Every time I did it kind of from the outside in, and I was like, well, this will look good on my reel, or I need to do this for a buck, or now look, and sometimes you got to do this stuff. So I'm not saying, look, we don't live in an idealized world, but I just mean those experiences were always so far less than the experience that when I was inside that story, man, and I was like captivated by that story, and it was like I had to tell it. Then it just, all those other things seem to just, they fall in line. It's like the universe kind of aligns, and there's like this magic that can happen to you, and that's what makes me crazy about filmmaking. The chance of that happening, and when that does happen, is so amazing, So I do actually mean the story.
Totally. Yeah. That is the core of it. Because of course, without it, you can't be a storyteller.
Yeah, there's no point.
But and what I just am more kind of pushing back on things that you see just all the time about, like, what is the key? What is the fundamental key to filmmaking?
For sure. Well, that
it's
stuff is all garbage.
Because for me, and of course, it's also it's subjective to a degree, because there are some people that don't mind a movie with bad cinematography, or don't mind a movie with bad performances. There are certainly exceptions to every rule.
It's either a story is compelling or it's not.
Yeah, but I do think that there's a level to which the movies that people generally consider the great, and that kind of in the public eyes, or the public eye are considered like the greats. They are both masterfully told stories that have wonderful screenplays, excellently written, rich drama narratives. On all cylinders. But also, exactly. Everything's in place. And it's oftentimes it's kind of funny, because everything sort of seems to fall into place occasionally on movies like that, where it's like it's not even one person's doing. It's almost like an accidental success, which I think are really fascinating stories. But that's a whole.
Well, that's what I kind of mean when I say that I think that the universe kind of falls in line when the motivations are pure and the people are inside the story. But maybe that's kind of a little poetry idealist BS. But that's at least that's what I hold. But so we're getting close here to being done with these last couple lessons. I think maybe a couple things we've already kind of hit on, but we can kind of make sure that we've set our piece on a few of these last items. We talked about keeping your curiosity awake. We talked about being interested in other things in life. Herzog definitely speaks to that here in these lessons. And the reality is that, yeah, I mean, the filmmaking bubble is a goofy one. And, and Herzog basically, speaks to how silly and ridiculous it can be, and that you really better step outside of it regularly. And I think both of us agree. We've talked about this in at least one other lesson, and I think you and I maybe have slightly different opinions, or maybe not. I can't remember, but we'll find out again now. He talks about experiencing the essential moments in your life and keeping those separate and private. And I really agree with this. And the example he uses in the lesson is that, look, if and when you have a child, don't bust out the camera and film it. Be there to experience this moment. In other words, there are definitely parts of life that you should be experiencing, not recording.
Because you wind up just remembering through the phone.
Well, it's exactly, and I think they're two fundamentally different things. When you're filming something, you're observing, and when you are in life, you're experiencing. And it's not just, and maybe that's a little binary. It's not that you aren't having an experience when you're filming, but my point is that there are definitely moments where you should be experiencing life and not making films.
Your focus is averted.
Vital. Yeah. So it's experience those essential moments. And I love it. Of course, to wrap up these lessons and effectively the entire class. The last kind of subtitle that he ends on is "You are alone." And all you have are your dreams. And I love it. I love it because it's, it is kind of like, it's kind of a fundamental aspect to the human condition. In many ways, we are alone, and I just love that Herzog embraces this. It's just wonderful. I think it's like such a compelling part of his personality. But he talks about how, ultimately, and he has some wild examples here, which he shares, especially the one about the crew member getting a snake bite and having to cut off his own foot with the chainsaw, which as much as I love filmmaking, I really hope that, I hope that I never have to have a crew on a set, but he kind of talks about, in kind of a little bit of a fun way there as he tells these stories about how, ultimately at the end of the day, he had so many people trying to talk him out of what he felt was necessary for his film, especially Fitzcarraldo and the steamboat going over the mountain. And, thank goodness he stuck to his guns, right? Thank goodness we have that film, and thank goodness we have that story. And as he rightly knew that was such a powerful and vital metaphor, and thank goodness he stuck to his guns. And so, the reality is that oftentimes as an artist in any medium, you are going to be alone, and all you're going to have are your dreams. And but thank goodness that you have those dreams, because they mean everything.
And thank goodness you're following them.
That's not a small thing. Yeah, it's not a small thing. It's like he's like, and all you have are your dreams, but that's so much. And of course, in many other ways, you're not alone, actually, in reality. But yeah, overall, I just kind of wrap up this whole thing. It's been such a blast. I think you and I had seen these lessons originally.
Yes.
How long ago now? 4 years or
2016 would have been when
which blows my mind. Yeah. And I remember
almost 5 years now.
Almost 5 years. Yeah. And I just remember being so captivated. Of course, I had been a fan of Herzog's, and well before that, and I know you had too, but it was so fun to go back through these and kind of talk through them.
There's great bits. Like there's some really there's moments in there that I almost just like want to show other people. And just kind of give, like, people that haven't taken it, just kind of show them and be like, this is such a great line.
Well, hopefully this can be, a little bit, if somebody doesn't have the masterclass, or, if they haven't seen it, and maybe this series of podcasts will inspire them to check it out, but it's so worthwhile. So it's been a blast. I can't believe that we've wrapped up all these lessons. It seemed like when we started, a few months ago, it was like, it was going to take us forever. Well, here we are at the end. And
it's also, I think it's important to note too, again, that we have no affiliation with Masterclass, but I would, and I'm sure you would too, I would certainly recommend
the class,
the Herzog class.
For sure.
It because again, and I've said this so many times, and I think if you've been listening to this, you probably have figured it out. It's not just about, the filmmaking technique. It's not just about here's how
a philosophy of life and art.
It's very much a kind of transcends all that stuff.
It really does.
Kind of goes into the philosophy of life, and it's very inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it inspired us to do 20 episodes of a podcast on it, and
to continue. And I think that's again, and we will be keep going. As we said at the beginning, we're going to be. Yeah.
It's been such an inspiration for us. But as always, I mean, one of the things I could talk about film and filmmaking and art and life and just pontificate on that stuff forever. It's just endlessly interesting to me, but it also helps me refine my own views. I mean, talking about it here forces me to think about it more, and helps me refine, kind of my philosophy of filmmaking and art. And I'm sure it does the same for you. And that's kind of what it's all about. And hopefully it's interesting for a handful of people out there. So I'm so excited for our next episode. We're going to move forward from the lessons and go on to some new things. And I'm super excited about it. So, All right, man. Well, as always, Cullen, thanks for a great conversation, and everybody out there, thank you so much for listening. We look forward to our next episode, and until then, signing off.
Goodbye. All of life is suffering, and you are all alone. The phenomenon of creation is the essence of life, the fire of our own evolution. Let the flame that is filmmaking carry you into the sky. Werner Herzog.